My name is Laura Porter Jones. I'm joined by Daryl Vavricek. And we're going to talk for the next hour or so about how to support students with disabilities, especially in this COVID, not quite COVID, maybe we're getting out of COVID. I don't know. But Daryl, you want to
COVID,
go ahead and introduce yourself?
COVID light,
COVID,
maybe.
COVID light. Yes.
That's the hope,
COVID
right?
refresh.
Yeah.
No,
As
no,
we've been
no.
doing, well, this particular webinar series, but I've carried this slide into many others. I just like to show
It's a
off my
great slide.
family. Yeah.
Well, you should.
So
They're beautiful,
I was telling
especially the dog.
somebody next fall I will have one in college, I will have one in high school, I will have one in elementary, and I will have one in preschool.
Oh my
And
God.
and Tommy the dog hanging out. He's so it's busy days, so the reprieve of hanging out with you all is is welcome, and I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, yeah, I understand that. And I'm Laura Porter Jones, and the range in age from my kiddos is 35 to 21. So I had that experience a few years ago,
hmm
not that long ago. But
That's why I call you for parenting advice all the time.
yeah, I don't know how good I'm at that. But um, I'm also a proud grandma. And that beautiful young lady in the top right-hand corner there is my oldest granddaughter, Magdalena Elizabeth, who is now 15 years old. And Maggie arrived on this planet with something called Kabuki syndrome, which is a very rare disorder. It's similar in some of its manifestations to Down syndrome. Organs were not in the right place. She was born with two holes in her heart. She is nonverbal. She signs a little bit. She has never taken to a communication device. I worked in SPED for 20 years before Maggie showed up. I didn't know diddle squat about SPED until that beautiful child arrived in my life. So
hmm
what I'm hoping to impart today is not only my work as a teacher, as an administrator in special ed, but as somebody who has walked the walk for some time now. So Daryl, you want to walk us through what we're going to do today, or I don't know, maybe you don't.
I, I can. How about that? Under
Okay,
duress.
there you go.
So when we really look at our time spent here, it seems like a lot, and these will be themes that we work through the conversation. I'll take this moment. Some of you are returning smiling faces.
Mm.
Rebecca Long, as she works on her lunch. You don't have to talk. I'm just saying
No,
hi
no,
because
no, don't.
I see you there, and others. But the goal here is to really talk a little funding. There
Mhm.
are some strategies that I want to talk through a little bit that I've seen when I've had an online school or schools that we consult with now around the globe. There are some products that we can sprinkle in the conversation too, as we do work for Edmentum with that are solutions. And then again, really hammering home, at least in my mind, that being a special education teacher, non-pandemic is a heavy lift. And
Agreed.
to try and do so in a remote and distant and support these kiddos that all have unique and special needs is I don't bless everyone's hearts when it comes to that. So I mean, I just look forward to a good conversation.
Fair enough.
hmm
Well, it's
Well,
kind of
yeah,
like the image of trying to fly the plane midair while you're assembling it.
hmm
I used this slide almost exactly a year ago. I was asked to do what I would term a crisis schooling webinar
yeah.
for SPED folks across the country. And I mean, everybody on that webinar, and we had probably close to 200 people who joined us who were like, what are we going to do? And the first thing I had to say was, take a deep breath.
Breathe.
Don't panic. Give the best effort that you can, but please don't beat yourself up if it's not what you expected it to be or if it's not
Mhm.
perfect. And certainly, we have to be willing and able to share now more than ever. Um, my experience as a young SPED teacher was one of isolation and being siloed. And I vowed to myself that as an administrator, I would do everything in my power to try to break down some of those things. And now is a perfect example of when we really do have to rely on each other, regular ed to special ed to our ancillary services administration. We got to help each other out. So,
Mhm.
to start off, I've got a couple of questions. And if you want to come off mute, if you want to weigh in either in the chat or what have you, I'm really curious now in mid March of 2021 if you've learned some things during this time when working with students identified with special needs. Have you gleaned some nuggets of information that perhaps you would be willing to share with the group today about what you've done that's been successful? Any volunteers?
I can go.
Please.
I know that with some of our students that are special ed, we actually had somebody virtually be with them all day that needed it. I'm not saying that that has helped, but there's support there. The child knows that there's support there.
That you may not think it is helping academically, perhaps, but I can assure you that from a non-academic, social, emotional place, it has profoundly helped.
It helped the parents. I guarantee you
It
that.
sure helped the parents too. You know, and that
100%.
goes back to my do what you can, and you know, it's okay. We're going to have to deal with compensatory time. We're going to have to look at extended school years and how do we go from here and so on. Oh, I guess the most important question at the bottom is, how are your teachers doing? And Rebecca, you know, a few days ago when we talked previously in a different webinar, you know, you were very, very open about sharing some of the trials and tribulations that your staff have been through. And I was really impressed with the fact that you clearly check in on folks in an authentic fashion on a regular basis. And that to me is the difference between an adequate administrator and somebody who really is going to get the job done.
Between Ms. Freeman and myself, we're there. I mean, they can call us at any time.
Yeah.
And
You know,
that we get that. It shows.
Right. And it's funny because we almost can tell when something's wrong with somebody.
Of course,
we can
because
just
you
see
have
it's
that
on their
relationship.
face. Right. It's on their
Set it
face.
up. You got it.
But I know, like you're saying, how what do we do with progress monitoring? So
Sure.
I have instructional assistants that are in those rooms with special ed kids that are, you know, with other students, and we have them actually work in small group instruction with them. And then of course my special ed teacher pulls them out on her Zoom, but they are keeping every little, like they're just writing all day. I mean, because I mean, if anything has come out good of this, they can actually write all that stuff all day because they're on Zoom, you know. It's not like they're running around the building. So
yeah, it's a
there
pandemic
has some
positive.
good has come out of it.
Oh yeah, and I'm hoping that as we move along and go forward, we will see some of those rays of sunshine, if you will.
Kimberly has her hand raised.
Please go ahead.
As well.
I'm not able to see that, so thank you, Daryl.
So I think the one thing that we've learned from this experience was the power of our paraprofessionals. We have a pretty large group of paras that work in our school. We're a small high school in Philly, but we have a pretty large group of paraprofessionals. And instead of releasing them at the beginning of the pandemic, we kept them and reconfigured their jobs. And the work that they have done, it has been remarkable. They mentor, they follow, they chase, they call, they're like a first line of defense for a lot of our students. They progress monitor. We've really been able to build their capacity as partners with teachers. We have one that's assigned to every grade level, and they work. And then we have a few that are, I mean, I'm so proud of the work that they do on a regular basis, and it really allows the teachers to do the teaching. We also did that for for our special education team as a whole. So we reconfigured the way that we have our case managers assigned to classes, and they meet with their students every single day.
Let me ask you a question,
provided
Kimberly.
us the flexibility to do it.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
How much of that new strategy, or whatever you want to call it, are you going to carry forward?
I think we're going to carry a lot of it forward. I think that we have room, I guess, to reconfigure some of the budgetary expenses that might allow us to provide some of those additional resources and supports within the classroom model. I mean, it's a little harder to have them chase in the physical building, chase kids around, but
Sure.
but they've been assigned to like groups of students, and so we can look at the way that we roster students and then roster teachers' schedules and things like that. But yeah, this has provided a great deal of flexibility to do some of that stuff.
Awesome. Darlene, did you have your hand up as well? You're on mute, my dear. You're still on mute.
Okay, sorry
There
about
you go.
that.
That's
Yeah.
all right.
Well, for me, because I work within two buildings, in Miss Long's building as well as an instructional coach, I have the opportunity of working with students that have IEPs behaviorally and academically, or ones that are in the process. So, which are still considered special ed because they're in the
Yes.
process.
Yep.
So we treat them like they're special ed students. So I work with one student in particular that comes to mind who's in the process, and I pre-expose that student to the content that she will then learn in class. So because of that pre-exposure, then that student a lot of times feels more confident in answering question and is an active participator in class. Now, does that happen every day? Not 100% of the time? No, but it has happened since I've been helping her since October to now, depending on the math content.
Preview review.
So that's been
Good stuff.
very great for
Well,
that
and
student.
preview review, yeah, Laura, but I would also contend that Darlene's been proactive in procuring the skills or facilitating a relationship with that regular ed teacher and that collaboration piece. And that's a disconnect that we see a lot, sadly, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that siloed feeling, or this is an IEP kid, you deal with it. So Darlene, when you write your book on how you were successful in breaking down the regular ed teacher's walls, I'm first in line. But that's a really important collaborative thing, is finding out what those students' accommodations need and thinking about the learner, and then leveraging what you know about the regular ed scenario. I really love that.
Yeah.
Well, with
Good
Miss
stuff.
Long's leadership, we do meet and talk about kids. So, and we talk about data. So that is a group norm.
Yeah.
So I think that helps that because we're talking about kids, there is our teachers do not necessarily have that barrier.
Well, in culture, you know, Miss Long, you've built culture in that's you mentioned norms, and Kimberly brought up the fact that there was culture and an ability to pivot and adapt. And what she said, I just want to pull on the thread a little bit, Laura, because you and I have been in this spot. We've been in that spot where it's okay. I know your job description said this. I know you signed up for this, but this is the need. And people, you know, and off you go. So I think a pandemic piece of that we're seeing as I have these conversations all over is the rigid thinking of a job description. Now we all wear different hats, but literally doing other duties, you know, and things to fill the void has to be in a safe culture. And I'd be willing to bet a lot of work by Kimberly's world has led to the ability to pivot quickly like that. Just another call out.
No, good stuff. Good stuff. So let's take a look here, because one of the things is if you've created some new systems, whether it's making enhanced use of your paras or finding a different structure through staffing or what have you that's worked, you need to be aware, and I'm sure you are at this point, that there's money coming. Okay. And it's important that it not just through the next round of ESSER, but the state of Pennsylvania SEA has 10% reserved, and it calls out particularly access for students with disabilities. So it's likely there's going to be some other block grants or other funding streams in addition to those various title funds and so on and so forth. And most of them are going to be connected in some way with remote learning. Because we know this across the board, regular ed, SPED, purple, green, 6 feet tall, 3 inches tall, there are going to be some families that are going to say, look, we like the flexibility of remote learning. We don't feel safe, or whatever it is, we plan to stay off campus. And so if we want to keep that ADM, we're going to have to continue figuring out appropriate ways to serve these students. And that's going to involve some advanced training. That's going to involve some creativity, which Daryl's going to get to in terms of some of those functional models, and really reaching down deep and saying, okay, what have I learned over the last year? What worked? What didn't work? And of those things that worked, what can I possibly expand on? Okay. So the law that was just signed by President Biden a few days ago is the largest package of funding in our lifetimes, point blank. And it's a tremendous amount of money, which I immediately go, either we're going to do amazing things with this, or ugh. I'd like to be hopeful. I'd like to be optimistic. But I'm going to say right now that it's going to be very much up to administrators at both the building and the district level to be creative in the moment. Resist the urge to go back to the status quo on March 12th of 2020. We have an opportunity here, and they're going to help us to fund that and to build that, okay? For the first time in the 32 years that I've been doing this, IDEA is going to be fully funded. There's not going to be that gap of 32 some odd percent that's left behind. So maybe this is a point in time where we can really think cleverly about how we can stretch a bit. So keeping with the flight theme, can you tell that I miss traveling? Can you tell that I sigh. I miss being in buildings with schools and teachers and students, and it's my heart, and I haven't been able to do that for a year. So here's the other issue on this, is we're seeing more and more of these COVID variants come up. And for those of you who've been fortunate enough to get vaccinated, that's wonderful. I'm getting my first shot tomorrow. I'm very excited about that. But there are variants out there. And, yesterday I was working with a school district in Kansas. People there, for a variety of reasons, political, social, et cetera, are saying, not getting it. You can't tell me to do that. So the chances of certain states reaching herd immunity are dropping. And so my concern is that we get into these summer months, we're going to see certain pockets of this rise up. Philadelphia may well be one of those, okay, or places in Pennsylvania and the surrounding areas. Again, there are going to be some families that go, you got to have a remote option for me, or I'm not going to come back. So what do you suggest, Daryl? What should we consider?
Yeah, I mean, we have 39 minutes and I can't do any of these major discussions justice, but I at least think it's worth our effort to identify a theme or a spot to just make sure that we're feeling good that an online setting is viable still. And when we think about instructional strategies, we have to still deliver academics to learners. And there are 100 ways, and I'm going to ask for some examples of what you all are doing as well. But there's some sound processes that I've seen, or staff that I've worked with or that we're consulting with now around some just good practices. And then there's always due process, right? There's always paperwork. We heard that people are taking notes. So how and what are some things to just remember around that? I'm not too deep into that one because every state, we're all under federal compliance, but then buildings have their own resources and strategies. So I'm not going to try and reinvent that wheel. And then just reminders about behaviors and learners and when they're in their home spot, and maybe have some good discussion around that. So Laura,
and for those of you that were part of our SEL webinar, that is very relevant to this conversation too. So we're not really going to revisit that. But if you were not able to avail yourself of that particular webinar, everything that we said in there would be applicable to those kinds of behavior strategies, whether working completely remote at home or in another kind of midpoint environment. So.
Yeah, so go ahead and dance to the next slide. Let's just jump into, I'm gonna die on this hill now. I think I've absolutely put myself here that any conversation, anybody that's willing to listen, whether it's their own choice or in this case a captive audience, the shift in pedagogy is happening, and schools that get ahead of this, schools that really do adopt a guide on the side mentality, and I'm talking about regular ed right now, are going to survive. Schools that don't, schools that continue to not think about that culture shift, I don't know the timeline, 3, 5 years or whatever, they're going to continue to lose the students in their district or lose their students in their program because there's going to be other more engaging and flexible and deeper DOK examples out
Well,
there in
enriching
schools out there.
options. Yeah.
Enriching, that's the word. Thank you. And
Mhm.
so thinking in a SPED model, it is important, I think, to know that there's a movement to leverage digital content in effective ways that involve synchronous and asynchronous moments. And Darlene, you're a fantastic example. Laura, if you switch to the next one, we didn't come up with like a keyword to switch slides or anything today. Maybe it's
Oh, so
maybe
this
it's
is the great white.
mint M&M or something.
Oh, I like it. Yes.
So when we think about an instructional strategy that leverages digital content effectively, one that's really easy to implement and a quick win when we think about change management, is the idea of digital content can still fit in that direct instruction spot. So if you land your eyes on box 1 there on the left, it's a preview. Darlene, you did this with your special ed learner. Give and use the content asynchronously or synchronously in that moment to help that student. So you did a mini preview, and then teacher can do preview, and then step 2 is the delving into that content. So student maybe works through a tutorial, or I'm using our courseware curriculum context here, but maybe a student works through a tutorial, engages in the curriculum, non-penalty. We're learning here.
Mhm.
And then there's a formative moment, right? Whether that's another product or it's the mastery test built into the module in courseware. And then step 3 is that teacher has that review mod or the if then moment, right? And that's, again, you're giving the teacher the art of learning. Same with you folks. That's that spot where you're intervening or thinking about along in the cadence with the regular education teacher to make sure, one, that the kids you most care about, the ones on your caseload, or if you're an academic coach or wherever you fit into this cadence, you can then engage. And then in short order, and a lot of times we pitch this as a 1 day, 2 day moment, right? So day 1 is in box 1 and day 2 is in box 3, or it could be a 4-day cycle, day 1 and day 2, and then 3 and day 4 as it's clearly laid out. And then that scaffolding and that reinforcement, that supporting, the remediation, the again, I call it the art of teaching, is what classroom teachers do. And I'm saying that purposely. And just yesterday, I recorded a webinar for a conference in the UK, and one of their big initiatives is access and equality. And so in this kind of cadence, all students are getting that consistency of the information, but have people and items working in to bring them up or down in that equitable conversation, which we had earlier in the week, Laura. So
And if I can interject,
of course,
because I know you
always.
get going,
I
which is
d-
good.
It's fine.
But one of the things that this is definitely what we would term as a regular ed model. And I love this because there are several cases and points with students that I have known over the years that I can see how I might go from 1 to 2 and back to 1 and then to 2 and
100%.
then to 3. So, I know that it's linear in here, but I love that you put those kind of curves in there, because we recognize in SPED that if it's not working, we change it up. We don't wait.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if that preview didn't work, I got to go back and I got to find a different mechanism. And so at some point, Daryl, I may challenge you to modify this graphic just slightly so that you can show some of those arrows in a more circular fashion, because I may get all the way to number 4 and
Mhm.
discover if I've got a student who has specific learning disabilities and has a processing issue,
Yeah.
something
Yeah.
didn't stick.
Yeah.
And so it's not a harm, it's not a foul, it's
Yep.
okay, we got to
Yeah,
circle the bases again, but we
it's
may
never
not
good enough
need
for
to
you, is it,
do,
Laura? I get it. I'm just kidding. I'm just
we may
kidding.
not need to do number 3, but we do need to do 1 and 2 again, or what have you.
Fair
So if
enough.
I
Oh,
have this laid out
100%.
and I understand the pieces, all of the pieces have to be there, but they may not fall in the same order. That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying.
No,
Awesome.
completely agree. And it's what we do when we talk about personalized learning and scaffolding. It's always going to be messy. That's the point. And to get to
Yes.
what that student needs. You might live in you might live in 4 for a little while, right? and
Yeah.
and spin there because that's your formative moment. That's your check for
Yeah. But
understanding.
you
And
don't want to get stuck either.
well,
You don't want to get
stuck's
stuck.
maybe
If you
aggressive, but
if
yeah.
if you're stuck and you're finding I'm having to do this, that means you probably need to go back to 1 or 2.
Hmm.
And that's okay
Hmm.
too.
Hmm.
So, I think as teachers, we have a favorite of these, and we may sit in that place for a period of time.
Yeah, and if we did a full workshop, that would be the discussion and an activity that I have where we work through that concept of what does a full skill cadence and scope look like, and
Mhm.
where then if it is time to move on, right? We have 180 days. We do have to move forward, but what's the building block or a foundational thing that we might check back with, and that's where that spiraling conversation comes in. So, yep,
Good stuff.
it's hard to limit a whole pedagogy into one slide, and
I think you did a good job.
well,
I think you did a
thank
good
you.
job.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. What
Okay.
what call outs or feedback do we have? Like, does this resonate? Is
Here,
this
let me
a
go back.
fool's
Yeah.
errand? Like what? Yeah, because
Does this make sense? Yeah.
what's a reaction that of what I just kind of talked about?
And that's what we're finding out. We're finding out that our students, like with the help of Miss Freeman, the students getting that one-on-one,
Yeah.
preview where the teacher right now can't give that child that preview undivided attention. So, but Miss Freeman can. So we're
Mhm.
finding out what, as I have these team meetings and we're talking, what do the students need?
Well, you bring up a really good point there. That may be a different person who takes one of these different roles.
Mhm.
Right.
And
It doesn't have to be the same instructor.
and not every building is going to have the human capital to
Mhm.
put that model into place.
Mhm.
So, Miss Long, I would counter with, I think the regular ed teacher can do preview if you have some content or a something or an LMS, right?
Mhm.
That then Miss Freeman could also leverage, right? So there's lighter, or vice versa, so both are collaborating in the consistency, because we really always, I think we're striving to have our special education students see all of it, right? So we don't want to do something a little bit different where the regular ed kids might benefit too. But yeah, it's fantastic. I love hearing what you guys are doing. Other call outs or pushbacks, even if you want.
All righty.
Yeah, I'm waiting on the tried. The 15-second wait time it feels like
Yeah.
an eternity. But
I understand.
so when we talk about another bucket, right, compliance and the ever exciting due process and forms,
Very
and
exciting.
it's like I'm
Woo-hoo.
sure y'all have your internal trainings for sped forms and things of that nature.
Mhm.
What's come to the light in a lot of conversations is the consistency of thinking about data privacy. Sharing of information in an email is a no-no, in most cases,
Mhm.
especially to thinking about specific procedure and protocol to keep you in compliance. Because when a parent can't come to a building, and you got to have an IEP meeting, and then you have to have your specific moments and follow the 30/90, all the right numbers and things. And I've been removed long enough from it where you notice I don't give exact details because I don't remember them
Mm-hmm.
all, but you all do. But it's the idea of making sure you're leveraging tools and resources that fit those and have been vetted or approved by the right people on data privacy. Zoom and Google Meet do.
No, they don't. Zoom
Okay,
does.
Zoom
Google
does.
Meet does not.
We'll take it off there. Why did I do that?
I don't know. You can get in trouble with Google Meets. It's very easy to be hacked, and you can end up with someone listening in on an IEP meeting who should not be there. Sorry, my friend.
No, I will never pretend to know everything.
No.
So, but one thing then is internally have that discussion around if recording, why are we recording?
And asking for permission.
Yep. And whether it's implicit or implied or it's truly signed at some point, there's internal
Mhm.
documentation that we're thinking about schools not having the right language in that. So revisiting
Yeah.
that little moment has been one that's been called out recently.
Let me comment on that because there's 2 lawsuits pending that I'm privy to. And the one was a case where a school had tried multiple times to contact a family due to a job loss. They had moved. They decided to go ahead and conduct the IEP meeting and record it, thinking that would meet the burden of proof in the state of New York. It did not. Okay. So if you're going to choose to have those IEP meetings virtually, that is still not the best case scenario, but certainly during a pandemic, it is recommended.
Yep.
But you still have to get those same parental permissions. You can't skate on those. You can't just bypass those. And that includes signatures or getting a parent on the phone recorded, giving you verbal permission.
Yep.
So.
And then housing that in a safe and appropriate
Agreed.
spot. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
So those are heavy, like, you know, and again, all of these could be their own 60-minute webinar. The last one is one that, in order to be effective and consistent and not spend truckloads of money retraining people all the time, there's interesting stats out there. 49 states right now do not have enough special education teachers to meet the federal requirement.
Which state
yeah.
does?
I don't know. I was talking with Elizabeth and she shared that. I'm like, that's insane. Yeah, it's probably like
That's
Hawaii
correct.
or something, right?
Might be. Yeah.
And some other statistics that I think are worth mentioning, and then it's the next part is what do we do with it, right? So 50% of special education teachers quit within the first 3 years, and 75% within 10 years. So we're losing half of our special education teachers.
Our brain trust. It's
and
gone.
what's worse is in the last 3 years, the graduation in that specialty area has dropped by 17%. So not only are we short, we're getting shorter. And so
And we're identifying more students.
and
Yeah, the rates exactly so.
And I got on a soapbox in a meeting yesterday that every kid should have an IEP. And they're like, Daryl, what are you
Yes.
talking about? And I'm like, never mind, let's not go down that path. But here's so locally, regionally, nationally, actively seek out your sources. If you're an EBD teacher and you're the only one in a high school, what a isolated feeling. Find a consortium. They're out there, and this is not a plug for a company that I work closely with in consulting, but like in Minnesota, there's a company called Creatively Focused, and they work nationally, but the mission literally of that company is to retain special education teachers. And schools that I work with, they use them as a contracted services, everything from director of ed to professional development and so on. And again, places like that do exist, and to seek them out and build that special education community. Even webinars like this, all of us are like-minded here. Write down names or put in chat what school you're at, and build that community. It's so important. And if we don't address that attrition, I don't want to know where we're at in 3-5 years. And And I just thought that
It's
was
not
an
pretty.
important, I just thought it was an important call out today. I don't know where to go
Oh,
next, but
absolutely.
we won't solve that
I
one.
don't have an answer for you. And I have information, Daryl, on the number of students who are now coming through our colleges and universities who are preparing to become certified SPED teachers, and the
Yep.
numbers are not good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Well, and
sorry to be the
and
bearer of bad news, but yeah.
no, for sure. And I think this is a really big discussion and probably larger than this brain trust can figure out. But like even Rebecca, I think you mentioned the other day that teachers are coming to you with just lack of fundamental understandings of standards and skills. Am I remembering
Yeah.
that correctly? Yeah.
Mhm.
So Darlene's shaking her head.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a feeling, Miss
Yeah.
Freeman, that you help them learn quickly what they need to know. Is that an accurate?
Huh? She
Come
does
on.
not suffer fools.
I don't
No.
think so.
That is an accurate assessment. And
I
I
knew
am
it.
learning to have a voice and let it be heard.
There you go. Good.
That's what it takes.
Good.
Do
It-
not
it does.
apologize for that, and please don't stop doing that. We
No,
need
is
that.
it? When you're advocating for learners and from the position of an advocate for kids, you're never in the wrong, in my opinion.
What happened with becoming dual certified? Like, where did that fall short?
It's a good
Well,
know,
it
question.
depends on particular states, but
Right.
at least, I live in Minnesota, but I work in a number of different states. Here in Minnesota, it has become incredibly difficult. You would have to have enough credits to earn your PhD in
Yeah.
order to be cross-categorically certified anymore.
So it's a lot. So it means cost. I mean,
And time. And
yeah.
time. I mean,
Yeah.
somebody'd have to
Right.
be in school till they were 27 or 28.
Yeah, I don't know
And people are
how it
like,
is-
I can't do that.
I don't know how it is in Pennsylvania, but
Mm.
I mean, I know there was a push there for a while,
Mhm.
But I also know in our organization, we have teachers that are dual certified and they're like, hush, hush. They don't want anybody to know that they have special ed certification.
I will admit to
So-
being one of those people
Yeah,
in previous life. Please
yeah.
don't tell anyone I have an ASD certificate, please, please. Because what happens is they're the ones who get burnt out. They're the ones everybody dumps on, and you got to be real careful not to do that.
Right, right.
Good point.
Before we jump to the last bucket, around behavior and learning and talk about kids, any other programming conversations or do's and don'ts that again, this group is the experts. What else?
Mhm.
What did I miss that might be worth a call out?
I have a question. What have you learned about relationships with your parents over this last year?
It's a good segue too.
Parents, as far as school, personally or professionally?
Yes. Yes, because
How are
it's
your
holistic.
parents?
Go on
Darlene?
another limb.
Yeah.
I'll just go on another limb as far as relationships with everybody in your life.
Yeah.
And just being grateful for them and not taking
Oh, I love that.
everything and everyone for granted. Because if nothing else, this shows us how to be grateful and what is really important. And it's not, as Miss Long would say, just toilet paper and paper towels and Lysol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think relationships across the board, professionally and professionally, is
Mhm.
extremely, extremely important during this time, and has been. I just don't think we've realized it, and we've
Yeah.
taken a lot for granted.
You should
Thank
put
you.
that in your book, Darlene. That's
Yeah.
going to be important.
I know with us, we've built a team with the whole, like if it be sixth grade and it's a sixth grade team, the special ed person is part of that. The parent liaison is part of that. The instructional coach, everybody's a part of that because all of us bring something to that table.
Mhm.
And I think with the special ed, staff, now they feel there's a need for them. Because we might be working with a student that's just, having some issues like the one that Miss Freeman's working with, and we really realized there's special ed needs there. But the special ed teacher was allowed to put some input in and say some things, and, you know, everybody has a say, you know, on the whole, you know, everybody's just not separate.
That's
Laura, will you
positive.
pull up the next slide? I think that's an important call out of what I
The
heard
next
there
one?
was,
This?
oh no, you were on the right one. Apologies.
Oh, that's okay. I was like, what?
I'm not on the right one. I'm traveling along on the other screen here. When I didn't say I was good at this.
I can't read your mind, Daryl. I'm not
I-
psychic and I
come
don't
on.
want to be.
Yeah, it's a bad place sometimes. So when we think about what you just said, Ms. Long, around the flexibility, the opportunity to in an online setting, right? Let's shift the focus back to that. Your day can and should be different. You know, Kimberly talked about flexibility of role and duty. The online facilitation can and should fit more of that learner, especially when we're supporting students, and that team mentality. All of those people have the ability to check in and drop in and be part of that student's week in a frequency that's likely higher than if you were in a building. You because sometimes just because pure logistics are out of the way. And some of the call outs that we're seeing is when we're working with students in their home, right? Helping families identify and work through the essentials, the bare minimums, the non-negotiables, whatever you want to call it. A proper seat, a proper spot, and lighting is really important. It seems trivial, but it's not. And when students are not in a comfortable or a well lit or a distraction limited spot, now we're back to Maslow, you know, and we can't do academic
function.
things. And if they're
Right.
already met with some barriers that have been identified and you're working through per their IEP, you do have to address those, and working then collaboratively with other people on the team and the parents to think about and decide how that works. The other thing we do quite a bit with online schools is thinking about offering flexible moments, right? Like teachers are used to having 8 a.m. meetings, kiddos are not, right? Or helping define when that student is best. If you know, if I'm working with Kathleen and I'm finding that 1 o'clock after lunch is an extremely distracted time, I have the flexibility to rethink when I'm going to engage with her, and maybe it's after snack at 10:30, you know, and we use lunch as a motivator. I don't know. I mean,
No,
I'm
but your
food
point is well
motivated.
taken. And if you go back and you overlay that model of the 4 different steps,
Yes,
and you
exactly.
think of those as sort of bite-sized moments that are not
Mhm.
necessarily fully scheduled, but movable.
And
That's the
overbooking, yeah,
epitome of what we're trying to do in special education anyway, because we know that the status quo doesn't work for this kid,
right.
whatever the
Right.
reason is, whatever the barrier is. So in a way, if we start looking at some of these remote instructional models, we may actually end up solving a problem that we haven't been able to. That's my hope.
I
That's
I
my hope.
I think the regression back to what we used to do is my greatest fear.
Agreed.
I really do. There's takeaways, and I think I'm preaching to the choir here a little bit. You guys are proactive. You're seeking out webinars. I don't feel like, Rebecca, you're just waiting to be back in a building so you can just go back to normal. I think you're, you know, from what you've expressed, and clearly your team members here are articulating too. It's that thinking. What I worry about is the ones that just want things to go back to normal. So to not see the opportunity, I feel, is a disservice. So as much as I can say things like that out loud, I will. So.
Perfect.
And I even looking at this like with the 504 people, you know,
Sure.
you know, if somebody
Absolutely.
has celiac disease and they can't come to school,
Mhm.
because they're not feeling well, they could stay home and still get online and not miss a step,
Exactly.
you know, because just because they can't be in the building, they could still be home and we could still continue on what we're doing, what they're doing, you know. So a kid that wakes up in the morning and mom knows he's off,
Mhm.
you know, and
Yeah,
would have normally
today's
just
not the
kept him
day. Yep.
home,
Exactly.
would have just kept him home. He can be home and try to log on, you know.
Exactly.
And that's not such a fear anymore. Like I mean, I've been in education over 20 years and I still have days where my second grader and I point, she's right over there, right? But it's the idea of like, like it's
Yeah. Well,
hard.
yeah.
And
Today is
so
not that day.
non-edu that's true. It really
Yeah.
isn't. For either of us, quite honestly. It's good I have a closed door between us right now. She and I are battling. But the idea there is the flexibility, like you're articulating, Rebecca, is important, and a safe culture for both teachers and for the community. And I've said it in every webinar I've been in. The school classroom has extended out into everybody's home now.
Mhm.
And I don't think it's going to go all the way back into a building where parents don't know what's going on. It can't. I think it's
No,
just
it shouldn't.
that's a new normal that I encourage, quite honestly.
Indeed. Well, we
And one
are an
thing,
ed tech company, so
Yeah.
we know these things, right?
True story.
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I
and
didn't mean
one-
to interrupt.
that's okay. I just wanted to add that, in Pennsylvania, virtual learning has always been around for a number of years with the
Mhm.
cyber charter schools, et cetera. But the shift I'm seeing with the Pennsylvania districts is that the families are becoming more comfortable
Mhm.
with the schools, knowing that they have that connection,
Mhm.
that if their child decides to be virtual for next school year, for example, the parents know that they still have that resource and that building
Yep.
to go to
Yep.
to get that support that they need. And I think, that's been one of the biggest shifts I have seen from a family standpoint in trusting the schools and not automatically looking for another virtual option because they know
Mhm.
their schools are offering it.
Mhm. That's a really good call out. We're
Yeah.
seeing it in Minnesota. Because I can,
Mhm.
a very good friend of mine is still at Minnesota Virtual High School, and his numbers aren't declining. There's always a need for that, but they've leveled off in the sense, and he attributes it to schools have upped their flexibility, and they're not
Mhm.
hemorrhaging the learners that they used to.
No.
Now,
Well, they
there's a
want the
case for tried and true.
community. They
But
want the sports. They
absolutely,
want the
yep,
fine arts. They want
yep.
the parent community in their neighborhoods. But I don't want the 8 to 3 schedule. And my daughter
Exactly.
has celiac, or
Mhm.
there are other issues of sensory concern.
I'm in sports, I'm in, whatever, right? It's a myriad of things. So districts that are being proactive and offering flexible programming, that's a start. But where else do they have to consider? And Kimberly's spot on. School leadership being open-minded to flexible job descriptions is that next logical spot. And I'm not naive. There's teacher union conversations. There's stuff. Well,
Oh yeah, there's stuff percolating.
I'm not naive in that, Laura.
Oh, okay,
Let's-
okay.
And so when it comes to those discussions, and again, when we consult and help
Sure.
build online programming with school districts, including a project I'm on here locally, it is helping define what those literal job descriptions are, and
Mhm.
how come Laura didn't have to come into the building? I do.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and dispelling some of that culture shift that comes along with that. So
Or
it's not
the
an
8 to
easy
3
lift.
workday. Yeah.
Well, right. Yep. And everybody knows
Yeah.
that teachers don't just work 8 to 3. So let's be real. Everybody is working long hours and at the end of the week is exhausted. But did the kids make progress? Did we, so it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll stop.
No. These are all, I wanna point something out here. We are gonna share this PowerPoint out if you request it.
Oh, sure.
Because the last section of this has a lot of embedded links and resources. We are at Edmentum an ed tech company, and the three, main products that we have are courseware, which is our 6 through 12 digital curriculum for middle school and high school students, Exact Path, which is our adaptive diagnostic that fuels a learning path based on skills, It's an amazing tool to measure growth and to know exactly how to plan and react to instructional bumps. And then Study Island, which is our standards mastery. And so what I've done is I've embedded in here a brochure that literally lays out all of the embedded accommodations and possible modifications with those 3 programs. So if you're walking into an IEP and you've got goals in front of you, and you know this is going to be a student either in your building, hybrid or remote, and you're trying to figure out, how do I put all my digital tools together? These are terrific for your teachers and for your paras to understand what they can and cannot do and how they fit together. Now, that being said, there also are ways to accommodate low incidence. And I don't know whether anybody on this call has had any cases of low incidence SPED during the course of the pandemic. I personally have worked with over a dozen blind and low vision students now nationwide with our courseware and ExactPath. It does work with JAWS. It does work with several Braille readers. And we've found mechanisms, some of them a little clunkier than others, to make it work. So what I would ask is, if you run across those circumstances where you have a low incidence SPED and you're like, please give us a call. Reach out to Kathleen, or you can get in touch directly with Daryl or myself, and we will do our best to serve as an intermediary for you as you look for potential solutions, both within Edmentum and beyond. We're both product agnosticians, okay? What we want is the best for the child. And so, you know, if it has to do with assistive technology or a particular program or an app that fits with a program, we're happy to talk those things through. But there are lots and lots of options that can be utilized. And we want you to be aware of those. So if you'd like this PowerPoint, please let us know. And I guess what I've learned, I wanted to kind of do a summative of what I've learned in the last year, talking with districts and talking with teachers and talking with a lot of parents too, especially in the cases of some of these low incidence SPED students, is for some of them, this has really been an amazing opportunity. Yes, there have been behavioral issues and concerns and younger siblings or lost jobs and having to move in this, but I have found incredible nuggets of hope in here for students, especially on the behavioral spectrum, the autism spectrum, who were not successful in a large building with lots of noise and lots of movement and lots of change. And suddenly there are new things and new options for them that are incredibly heartening. When you combine that with this funding that's coming downstream, that's reason to be excited. That's reason to say, all right, I want to get to work here. I've got stuff I can and I should be doing here. So I'm going to turn off the PowerPoint here, and we're going to open this up for the last couple of minutes for questions, specific scenarios, things that you're seeing, or other stuff. Ask Daryl.
You can. I'm still trying to spell agnostician. Was that even a word?
It is now. It says it on my business card now.
Okay. I was going to put it in my job description, but I can't.
Please do. It's a
spell
great
it.
conversation starter.
I appreciate doing these with you, Laura. I think, come off mute, have some questions, or share a good story as we wrap this up.
Please.
We lost Darlene.
Oh, no.
Oh, there she is.
Okay.
I was just picking on her.
I just wanted to take a quick moment to thank both of you for hosting these webinars for us, as well as the participants for joining us. I know midday, midweek, sometimes these are hard to join in the chaos of everything else that's going on. But we've had some great discussions, and I've learned a lot just from hearing everyone here. So I appreciate, the time that you took out to conduct the webinar, Daryl and Laura, and everyone else for adding your input and your questions. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Amazing. I learned a lot, and I do actually have a question for the group that involves PSSA testing.
Sure.
So yesterday I had a conversation with a Philadelphia school that they decided that they're going to do the PSSAs this spring and not in the fall, because their 8th graders would have to come back in the fall as high school kids and take the test. I don't know why I just learned that, but it could be old news, but this is what schools are facing. So
Yes.
they said, we're not doing it in the fall, we're just going to do it in the spring. So I thought that was interesting. Are you all facing that too? Some of you might.
I think most of them are probably facing that at this point, I would assume, based on what I'm hearing on the grapevine. And I talked to one administrator yesterday in Pennsylvania, not in Philly, who said, you know what, we're swallowing hard and we're just going to look at it as a bottom baseline. This is the basement, and I'm not going to. The only way is up, and it's all okay. And he's doing everything possible to build up his teachers and staff and say, this is not a fault. This is not lost instructional time. This is missed instructional time. We're not going to use deficit language with these babies. We are going to tell them that the opportunity is in front of them, and we're going to move forward with confidence and boldly. And I was like, dude, I'd go to work for you in a heartbeat. Great attitude.
Thanks.
You betcha.
And, like a point of it is, I'm kind of glad that if we are going to take them, we are going to take them in the spring, just because if over that summer period, if we would wait till the fall, they're going to lose more. So let's just get it done. Let's
Good
just
point.
do it and see where they're at, where they fall. I know with us, I know Ms. Freeman and I, we've had the conversation. We're not really concerned because we've been instructing our students all along. And we've seen progress through Exact Path, through the other, assessments that we're using. So we're not, like, oh, this is going to be disastrous,
Yeah. Just keep swimming.
That's a really good call out. You have other measurement tools, right? So while that's a fence post in the ground, it's not the only one. And it's okay to take, if you think psychometrically, it's okay to take a spring measurement and then apply that to a mid-year the following year. It's not out of bounds to look at that as trend data as well. There are schools that do that with their map and such. So
Agreed.
And
Yeah.
we're going to be using our data as a teaching tool, even to begin at the start of the next school year, just to see where the kids ended.
Right.
And then using that with the fall diagnostics that they will take in September, and just using that as like a competitive strategy for them to compete within themselves to move forward. So,
well, and with Exact Path specifically, that learning path entry grade is a good indicator, right? So if they've dipped down 2-3 grade levels of skills, you target them, you personalize and you attack it. And yeah, you work on the skills remediation straight away. That's a good strategy. And for non-Exact Path customers, what Darlene's talking about is there's a diagnostic assessment and adaptive assessment within Exact Path that then gives skills to remediate those, or it gives lessons in practice, gives curriculum to identify and work through those skills as remediation. Yeah, that's a perfect implementation.
Even with our students, we've shared that data with them. This is where you are. This is where we want to see you go. And now that they're aware of the data, it's almost become competitive.
Tell me a
That's
little bit more about,
fantastic.
okay,
Oh,
now I
no.
want like another half hour with you, Mrs. Long, but what,
Yeah.
when you have that conversation, what are you showing them? The actual path or their diagnostic score? What do you do with that?
So
we
show
are
them their
showing the diagnostic, and we are showing them their lowest peg. We are showing them where they need to be, like if they are in 8th grade and they are focusing, and here is your skill level. Like, this is reality. This is not false.
Yeah.
And so what you think and what's reality, because the numbers don't lie, this is true. This is not fantasy island here.
And then
So-
do you set a goal then? Like what, and then?
Oh yeah, we set goals for them in an action plan, or that's what we're working toward. Some students are more verbal with their goal setting than others. So
Mhm.
some of them, if they know
Sure.
that they're like, let's say they're proficient or they're, they got 900 some pointage and they're looking at the national scale and they want to be over here, then their goal is to get here. So they're looking at their charts, they're seeing the growth within their chart when it goes up. They're also seeing if it dips. And then we have those conversations that why did it dip? What happened between the first and the second? We don't want it to go that way. What happened? Maybe there was something that I'm not aware of that was going on with you. Maybe you weren't feeling good. You need to say something. You need to tell us, because this is data that we use to ensure your instructing, ensure your growth and development. If we don't know that today is not a good day, then we need to know this. If it's not a good day, then we'll do it another day. Just tell us, because you guys have a voice too.
I love that. I love that.
Well, you just articulated self-agency over their learning. I mean, what better scenario can you ask for? All right,
They're middle schoolers.
Yeah, and they'll say to us,
you're doing it with
"Oh,
middle
we don't
schoolers? Come on, man.
Hey, hey. That's
That's
great.
amazing.
That's
Oh,
great.
we need to have those conversations, because if we don't, they, oh, Zach Paff's stupid, it's babyish.
They don't
it's,
have any stake in it.
It's wasting my time. And,
Mm.
this is kiddish. I'm doing stuff I already learned. I learned that in kindergarten. And I'm like, well, you were supposed to learn it in kindergarten.
yeah,
It didn't stick.
Somewhere along the way, you're
Yeah.
missing some kind of skill. So guess what?
yeah.
It's
Or
teaching you a different way.
yeah, or would you like to give me a better effort on the assessment? Do you want to do it again?
Well,
'Cause
they'll tell us that. Some
yeah,
of them say,
and
um,
do you
I
do you
didn't take
give
it serious. Can I retake it?
100%? And do you give them a chance to redo it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. I love
And
you
then it's
guys.
a
You guys are
totally
amazing.
different picture.
Nice.
You
Yeah,
know.
that's so
Can
great.
we take them on the road with us, Daryl?
I
Seriously, I'd like
Oh, yeah.
that. That'd be
Road
great.
trip.
yeah.
Road trip. I don't even
Some-
remember what a road trip is.
Someday,
Geez.
remember that when we
We'll
went
join your
places?
Yeah, we would go out. Yeah.
We'll join their
Well,
staff.
Well, we've got to be respectful of everybody's time here. So unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. So
Right.
we will share out the PowerPoint if requested, and this recording will be available if you'd like to share it with other colleagues, friends, etc. Please don't hesitate to do that. But we thank you so much for your kind attention and for your input. We value it very, very much.
Indeed.
I'd like to thank Sarah and Kathleen for putting all of this together. It has been a delight meeting with you over these last few days. So take care, be well, and wash your
Yep.
hands, please.
Have a great
Thanks,
Easter.
Rob.
Take care, everybody. See you later.
Cheers. Take care.
Hey, everyone.
Yeah, be
Bye-bye.
well.
Thank you.